General Hodges, all eyes are on Israel and Gaza, with the Israeli army now saying that they are preparing for the next stage of war. If the much anticipated ground offensive begins, what are the biggest risks?
I think there are three significant risks for the Israeli Defense Force. Number one, the most obvious, is when ground forces do go into Gaza, it is going to be very difficult. The fighting inside of a city, especially when Hamas knows, in fact, Hamas wants them to come in there. So I think the soldiers know that this is going to be very difficult. Plus, they are under enormous pressure to minimize civilian damage, civilian casualties, because the whole world is watching. And my president has made it very clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu that the U.S. expects that Israeli soldiers will obey all the laws of armed conflict. So this is difficult if you're a young officer or a soldier. You've got a lawyer here, you've got a journalist here watching everything, and you've got Hamas trying to kill you. So that will be difficult, but the Israeli Defense Force, probably best in the world in terms of training and equipment for doing this kind of mission. They know what's in store. The second big danger, I think, is if Iran opens up another front, Hezbollah coming from Lebanon or something to create more distraction in the West Bank, so that Israel now is having to worry about other attacks from other places, which I'm sure is going to happen. I just don't know how significant, but they'll wait for the Israelis to get the IDF to get fixed inside the city. The third, I think, main danger is, at what point do they stop? What's the mission? I understand the mission is to destroy Hamas and make Gaza uninhabitable for Hamas. Okay, does that mean Israeli soldiers are going to be there for months, that they're going to have to occupy? That will be very, very difficult. So getting the clarity of the mission, I think, will be very important.
And if and when such a ground offensive starts, it seems that there is a big risk, as you just said, that there will be a large number of casualties among Palestinian civilians, and that many of the Israeli hostages will be killed. So are there any alternatives to a ground operation?
Well, of course, there's always an alternative, but it may not be a satisfactory alternative. I think they probably are doing everything they can to rescue as many of the hostages as possible. And also, I think Hamas knows that hostages are much more valuable to them alive than killed, obviously. So in some ways, the hostages, I don't want to say they're not in great danger, because obviously they are, but Hamas needs those hostages because they know how much the Israelis value getting people back. And of course, there are a lot of Americans mixed into this, and others as well. So that will be one part of this. In terms of alternatives, I think the fact that they haven't started the ground operation yet is either because they're not satisfied with the conditions. They have not destroyed enough of the Hamas leadership and infrastructure with air power yet, or they're still doing what we call intelligence preparation of the battlefield, where you're building up or improving your understanding of where the enemy is, where the civilians are, where the tunnels are. That's a part of it. But they can't delay for a long time, because 300,000 reservists are called up. That's people out of the workforce. And so at some point, that will begin to matter. Hamas uses the time, of course, to improve their defenses, but the Israelis also are using the time to practice, to train, to prepare. I think the IDF will launch whatever it is they're going to do when the conditions are set. But I can only imagine that there's pressure coming from the U.S. government, other governments who are completely sympathetic with Israel's desire to destroy Hamas, but they also were very sympathetic to the plight of Palestinian people who are trapped there. And I think everybody would like to see the entire conflict contained and get back on track towards the two-state solution.
How would you describe the capabilities of the Israeli forces? Are they capable of fighting on multiple fronts in case Hezbollah or even Iran enter the conflict?
Yeah, they have a very significant military capability. A standing military of well over 150,000 troops, plus now over 300,000 reservists were called up. Interestingly, they called up 300,000 and 360,000 showed up. I mean, people came from the States back to join their unit. Obviously, they have a best air defense system in the world, the Iron Dome, at least best for what it was designed to do. So in terms of their ability to deal with multiple threats, I feel confident that they'll be able to do that. But at some point, they will want to be able to reach deeper into Iran or Syria or other places to prevent the Iranians from just delivering more and more ammunition, for example. And so this is what people will worry about, is the conflict getting outside the borders of Israel.
And amidst those growing fears of a potential escalation, the U.S. is increasing its firepower in the region. Could the U.S. be dragged into a wider regional war?
I don't think that's likely. I think Iran really does not want to see, U.S. Navy or other capabilities destroying what they have. I think it was prudent for the Secretary of Defense to deploy 2 aircraft carrier strike groups into the Eastern Mediterranean. They're there for deterrence, to convey to Tehran that this is not a bluff, that we are prepared, and more capabilities are being put into the region for air and missile defense, for example. But of course, part of this is there for contingency, in case they had to evacuate civilians, what we call a non-combatant evacuation operation, NEO. And other nations will be interested in being prepared to do the same thing. So it doesn't have to escalate. I think that the Iranian authorities will be thinking about how much can they do, finding what is that limit. But the idea of being dragged into it, I think my president, our Secretary of Defense, are going to be very careful about this. I mean, we've already seen where the Houthis launched missiles, and the USS Carney was able to knock down all the missiles. I think there'll probably be a few more tests like that, but it's in nobody's interest for us to become directly involved.
But there has been a flurry of drone attacks targeting the U.S. forces there. So is the U.S. Military prepared for this kind of warfare?
Yeah, I think I would imagine that capabilities to help protect troops in the different bases in the region from drones, those capabilities are there and more are being deployed. But when you're dealing with terrorist organizations that are willing to launch missiles, at any time, that is a constant part of the dangerous environment that they're in.
As the world's attention turns to the Middle East, the war in Ukraine continues. Could the U.S., especially now with the presidential election looming large in politicians' minds, could the U.S. do both? Provide military aid to Israel and continue with its military assistance for Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. President Biden said that the other day when he was asked that very question. He said, this is the United States. Of course, we can and will continue to support Ukraine, which needs to defeat Russia, because the Chinese are watching. Are we serious about everything that's at stake there? All the international rules-based order, respect for sovereignty, respect for human rights, respect for freedom of navigation, respect for international agreements. If the Chinese are waiting to see, are we really serious about that? So that's going to continue. And of course, the United States has made it very clear we're going to help Israel defend itself, particularly against a terrorist organization that we also would like to see destroyed. But I think, and thank you for asking this, these are not separate incidents. The biggest beneficiary of all this is Russia. The Kremlin wants to see all of us turn our eyes and resources away from Ukraine. And I think since October the 7th, you'd have a hard time finding any front page articles about Ukraine because of what's happening in Israel. Again, I don't think this is an accident. I believe that the Kremlin is working with their closest ally, Iran, to orchestrate this. I don't think there's a piece of paper that says, hey, on this day we want you to attack, but clearly they've been working together for years, and especially in the last few months. They are enabling each other with resources, weapons, and Hezbollah and Hamas cannot do anything significant without Tehran's resources, support, and direction. So I think the way the president has described this is we have to address this as a whole. I mean, we, the West, have to be organized, get our alliances and coalitions together, get our defense industry working again. And like when he spoke to the nation the other night, he invoked World War II. When the West woke up to the threats in different places, we got organized, our industry got organized, and then, of course, the superior economies, militaries, capabilities were successful. And I think that's how we approach this. You defeat Hamas by helping Ukraine defeat Russia, which is no longer able to help Iran. This is how we do this. And then that deters China as well.
But do you think that Russia played an active role in this conflict or just encouraged Iran?
I would say it's much more than encourage. I don't know that they've provided specific things. I mean, Russia is in such bad shape that they're having to import ammunition from North Korea. They import drones from Iran. But there's a lot of money moving around, a lot of other assets, things that are happening that would enable Iran to be able to do this. So I am 100% sure that this is an Iranian-Russian coordinated effort.
Thank you very much, General.
Thanks for the privilege.